In professional sports, a franchise player is an athlete who is not simply the best player on their team, but one that the team can build their franchise around for the foreseeable.
Welcome into a brand new edition of Franchise Players here on Tobacco Road Sports Radio, tobaccoroadsportsradio.com. You can catch us on Friday on terrestrial radio throughout the Triad in North Carolina, 5 p.m. WWBG 1470 AM, and of course at 6 p.m. on WTOB 980 AM, 96.7 FM in Winston-Salem. I'm your host, Desmond Johnson. It's a loaded show today. We've got Chris Lee from WRAL and co-host of Panthers Playbook with Dennis Cox. He's going to be stopping by. Of course, it's NFL draft weekend, so that's going to be the entire show pretty much this week. And then we've got CBS Sports and Westwood One analyst Ross Tucker stopping by to talk about the draft as well. But kicking things off, he is the host of The First Team, Joe Deleone from the Bleav podcast network, friend of the show. What's going on, Joe? How you doing, man?
Good. We were saying a little bit before. It feels like it's been a really long week, and it's only Wednesday when we're taping this. But I'm excited for the draft, but I'm also a little eager that we can kind of relax a little bit once this stuff is over.
I think there's going to be a lot of content creators, podcast hosts, writers that are just going to sleep after Sunday for like, for like a week.
I feel that.
So I wanted to pick your brain because throughout the college football season, you've kind of been my go-to guy to go to in terms of college football and as a whole, not just the ACC, having covered it for multiple podcasts for Bleav. So I figured who better to ask than you coming into this NFL draft. Of course, we primarily focus on the Carolina Panthers here in North Carolina, but I wanted to take kind of a macro view and kind of zoom out here for just a bit. I'm seeing like kind of some storylines developing amongst certain teams and things that they may or may not do over the course of this weekend. So I wanted to make it as easy as possible, not even easy, make it as simple as possible in terms of where you go with this. I'm interested in knowing, what are your three biggest surprises of the NFL draft in your head? Like, what are the three things that could happen that would be maybe a surprise to the general public, but not so much a surprise to Joe? Give me your first one.
So I think that a lot of these and any surprise that happens on draft day, it's going to come down to trades for teams that are trying to go and get quarterbacks. I think the biggest one, I don't know if this is super surprising, but what happens with the third overall pick? I really think that the Patriots are going to move out of that spot. I really Bleav that the Patriots are looking at this as a multi-year rebuild and that they're going to want to move back and acquire more picks in order to build a roster that is suitable for a young quarterback to succeed. I think that a good example is the fact that Mac Jones was thrown into an aging roster, and we saw how things slowly crumbled around him. And he had a really, really tough time, especially in his last year. Other factors certainly came into play, but I think that the Patriots, them trading out, and I think that the Minnesota Vikings are the most likely to move into that 3 spot so that they can go and get Drake May to secure their future.
Okay, there was a lot there. So I wasn't even thinking about Minnesota doing that with the Patriots. Why would you say the Patriots would not go after Drake May? Is it because of what happened a couple years back?
I just, from what I have heard, especially since the combine, they don't want to rush things. You know, they don't want to throw a quarterback into a spot where they know that right now their quarterback, or their situation rather, is not built for a quarterback to succeed. They consider most of their offensive players to be replaceable, except for maybe a couple offensive linemen, Ramondre Stevenson. Outside of that, they know they need to figure out where they're going direction-wise. So I think that because of this, they don't want to just toss Drake May in, or maybe it is Jay Daniels, maybe it's JJ McCarthy, throw him into the mix. And as we've seen so many other quarterbacks get thrown into a bad situation, they struggle. And so I think that right now they want to produce a good spot for Mayo to succeed early on, and they don't want to give him a quarterback that they have to babysit, develop, while they're at the same time trying to build a competitive roster.
Yeah, you don't have to convince me about, drafting a quarterback and making sure the situation's good, having watched Carolina stumble through 17 games last year with Bryce Young and basically no one in front of him blocking for the most part of the year. So I totally agree with that. It does feel like the Patriots are completely rebuilding at this point, but the roster had been kind of become more and more decimated the last couple of years of Belichick's reign anyway. Give me another one here. That's a good one. Of course, the Bears have 2 of the first 9 picks here in the NFL draft on Thursday night. Doesn't necessarily have to be a first round surprise, but give me something else that you kind of got bubbling in your head that could potentially happen from the tea leaves you're reading.
Yeah, I think that the Buffalo Bills or the Kansas City Chiefs are going to make a move up to take a receiver. I think this is less of a surprise, but more so me projecting something that could be spicy and exciting on draft night. One of those teams trades up into the top 12 to take one of the top receivers, whether that is Malik Neighbors, probably not going to be able to get into striking distance of Marvin Harrison Jr., but Rome Odunze from Washington as well. I think that both of those teams are in really difficult situations receiver-wise that they don't want to toil with, even though this is a really good receiver class, they don't want to toil with getting a guy who's more of a secondary option. They want to be able to go and get a premier target that they know is going to help bolster their offense. I pay attention to specifically what we saw happen this offseason. Rashee Rice was developing into a nice player, and then he's dealing with his off-the-field issues. We don't know what his short and long-term future is going to be. And then the Bills have to move on from Stephon Diggs. They don't have anybody. So I think that both of those teams are going to be aggressive in moving up. Maybe it's the top 12, or if a less spicier version of this, they maybe move up into the top, let's say 17 in order to secure a guy that they really like.
Okay, so here's the part where I try to tie the room together from the first 2 things you said, because I'm sitting there looking at the draft order from what you just said. The Patriots might control this board after pick number 2, because it feels like the Commanders and the Bears are picking. Well, we know the Bears are picking Caleb Williams. Washington's probably going to pick a quarterback as well. Then you get to the Patriots, and based off of what you first said, it means that pick might be in play. I could see Kansas City moving up to 3 to take Marvin Harrison.
Man, that would be a Julio type trade.
Yeah, that would have to be the move, right? Oh my gosh.
I just don't know if there's enough capital for that to even happen if they tried to make that move.
Yeah, see, that's the thing. All right. So, okay, you got me interested now. Give me your third one here.
I think that the last one is a very offensive line hungry team would trade up into the top 5 to go and get Joe Alt. And I think that 2 of the teams that come to mind, Las Vegas Raiders or the New Orleans Saints. And we've seen that the Saints before have already had a hunger for doing this. They already traded up to take Trevor Penning a couple of years ago. It might push them away from doing it because Penning hasn't exactly panned out. I just think, though, for how bad their offensive line and inconsistent it was last year, and then I look at the Raiders, they're trying to shore up their offensive line. There's plenty of teams, though, in the 10 to 20 pick range that need to really get a tackle, and I think somebody could be aggressive and go after Joe Alt.
Sorry, there's like a billion things going on right now.
You're good.
So between the I'm trying to I remember what I was going to ask you. JJ McCarthy. What is happening? Why is JJ McCarthy rocketing up the chart here? I don't understand what happened at the end of the national championship to now, where now he's considered, like, they're saying that he might go in the first 4 picks. Like, how's that even? Is that going to happen? Is that going to happen, Joe?
I think that at this point, it's kind of come to full fruition that it's going to come true. I think that with JJ McCarthy and the way that his rise and how much he's been talked about, it's enough proof that there is NFL interest. If there is a guy who doesn't live up to this draft type, if you will, that does maybe kind of fall to the back end of the top 10 or somewhere in the teens, it would make sense because this has been a meteoric rise. It's the typical example of a quarterback and NFL teams talking themselves into a guy. And it kind of happened last year with Will Levis, where teams were talking themselves into him and then they didn't bite on the bait of ending up taking him. But I think that because JJ McCarthy seemingly is the type of kid who's going to nail the interviews, smart kid, went to Michigan, which is a great academic school, played on a national championship winning team. He checks all the boxes except having the tangible results on the field. So it's all just the typical situation of teams being desperate to figure out what they're doing at quarterback. And that they're talking themselves into a guy that has some traits and maybe would be worthy of going early in the second round or the end of the first round. And it has just bubbled and bubbled up until this point where he might end up going in the top 10 or maybe even, as we've said, the top 4.
It's crazy. It's crazy. I feel like Jim Harbaugh's responsible for this. Like, he's just kind of pushed all that smoke out there to kind of get his boy up into the draft. It's weird to me. And then finally, I was going to ask you this, because we've been asking everybody this question. This quarterback class this year, the Panthers got maligned for the trade that they did with the Bears last year to move up to number 1 to pick Bryce Young. Would you pick Bryce Young or the field this year? Like, is there a quarterback in this year's field that you would have picked over Bryce Young, or would Bryce Young have been the number 1 quarterback coming out this year as well?
I think that if I put him into the mix of this year's class, I'm not taking him over Caleb Williams. I'm not taking him over Drake May or Jaden Daniels, but I think that he would fit right in there still as a top 15 pick. I think that he certainly would be worthy. You also have to take into account, though, what becomes tricky for figuring this out is that presumably if he goes back, he has an extra year to put on more weight. He has an extra year to develop, and he has an extra year to just prepare and get ready for the NFL. I think that maybe our perception of him would be completely different. So it's a little bit of a tough question because we're trying to project how he would fit based on how he was coming out last year. And there was a possibility that he could have gone back to school. There certainly was on the table. He just chose not to do so. I think he probably would have fit a little bit right after Drake May for me.
You're the first person I've heard this to not take Bryce first over the rest of them, and I can kind of get it. All the ones are bigger, and well, of course, the ones I've asked that question to are Panther creators. So they're kind of slanted in that. No, Bryce has to work. So, tell them where they can find you and your work, Joe.
You can catch me on Twitter at Joe Deleone, and then the First Team Pod on YouTube and wherever you get your podcasts.
There you have it, Joe Deleone, our college football guru. I'm gonna anoint you that going forward whenever we have you on Franchise Players, and we'll definitely have you back again soon.
All right, thanks, Desmond.
Coming up, we got Chris Lee from WRAL stopping by. We're going to dive deeper into the Panthers. What are they going to do on the opening of night 2? Are they going to even have that pick when we start night 2? It's Franchise Players here on Tobacco Road Sports Radio.
Franchise players are often referred to as the face of the franchise.
Welcome back into Franchise Players here on Tobacco Road Sports Radio, TobaccoRoadSportsRadio.com. A little bit of a new format here. Typically we bring in a Panther analyst, podcast host, content creator, player, coach, or whatnot for at least one segment of Franchise Players on Fridays. This will now become the Bleav in Carolina Panthers Xtra segment. You'll be able to hear the audio of this on the Bleav podcast networks, on every major podcast platform. And, of course, the video will be on Franchise Players as usual at Tobacco Road's YouTube channel, youtube.com/@Tobacco Road Sports Radio. Joining me right now, WRAL lead sports anchor Chris Lee, also co-host of Panthers Playbook. And I'm sure he's ready, just like me, for the draft to be over. Chris, what's going on, man? How you doing?
I'm actually looking forward to the draft. I'm actually excited to see what happens, bro, because
I say it every year.
Like Dan Morgan's been cooking. And so it's like, you can't, I don't know if you can actually, you have those after draft grades and stuff like that. You can't really grade what the Panthers are going to do really until probably the 2024 season is over. And you see how many of these draft picks are contributors to the squad and how many actually get playing time. And that'll show you how well they actually drafted. But I'm actually excited to see what they do, what kind of moves he makes, and how he continues his good run he started with free agency.
I did a radio hit for New Orleans radio, WWL, last night, and they were asking, with the Panthers not picking on Thursday, how much of the draft was I going to watch? And I told them, well, I don't know. The Lakers are playing at 10 and blah, 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 yada, yada. When we got off, I started thinking about it. Every single year, I start off with the number 1 pick of the NFL draft. And it just stays on like the whole night. Like I don't go anywhere with it. I'm just sitting there with it, fascinated with what's going on. Yeah. Of course, we don't have a pick on Thursday night. We have kind of control the board after that, though. Once Thursday night's over and we get to Friday, the eyes all kind of turn to Carolina. They got the top pick in the second round, pick number 33, as well as pick 39. I want to focus right there because, to be honest, I'm here on Bleav in Carolina Panthers. Me, Stu, and Skylar, we were joking. We don't do mock drafts. Like we look at it like
They're pointless to me.
Yeah, like what are we doing? Like we're just kind of killing time, and like there's a billion of them out there already. So we kind of focused on the first two picks. Those are the first two where we can kind of narrow in what can they get, because everything after that is really kind of a crapshoot. Like who's there, who fell, what team fell in love with a player a long time ago. There's no way to really know what's going to happen after that. And I promise the last couple of guys that the Panthers draft, the majority of us have never heard of them before. So we'll get to all that next week after we see what all we have.
That's why I like you, because we keep it real.
We keep it real. Like,
we're not going to really know these players.
I was telling our fans and stuff all the time. It's like, look, you don't need to hear us talk about some dude from Western Michigan that you've never heard of before. Like, we don't know like what he's going to do, but what we can do is talk about the needs of the team and what they should do. I love the fact that they've switched free agency period and the draft, where before it used to be free agency was after the draft. So you kind of really did go into the draft kind of reaching for some players here and there because you didn't know what you're going to get. Now, like you alluded to, Dan Morgan's been cooking this offseason. I've been really impressed. Skylar tabbed at Moneyball. If you've watched the movie Moneyball before with Brad Pitt and Jonah Hill, the true story of the Oakland A's.
I watched that episode where you guys talked about that.
Yeah, and when he said it, I hadn't thought about it, and then I was like, you know what, you're right, because they basically took the $30 million that Brian Burns wanted and flipped it into A'Shawn Robinson, Josie Jewell, and Jadeveon Clowney. So you pretty much got three starters out of the $30 million you would have been given to one, and they did that kind of all across the board. Good, shrewd trades, moving pieces around, and now they don't really have to reach, but there's this intriguing tier 2 group of wide receivers that are going to be there when we get to 33. If you're the Panthers, do you double dip in the second round at wide receiver, 33 and 39? Because it feels like there's going to still be wide receivers there at 39 that might be a good fit for Dave Canales' offense. What would you do there? Would you double dip?
I think it depends on what they've talked about, what they like in the situation that they feel like they're in, right? I think for sure, for somebody that I've been in love with, and I've been in love with him, since before the Panthers were in this situation. Last year when UNC and South Carolina played at the Duke's Mayo Classic at the beginning of the season at Bank of America Stadium, I was there to cover the game. And the person that flashed off the screen to me for South Carolina, I thought UNC should have blown South Carolina out the water. That probably should have been a 56-3 game or something like that. But the reason why they didn't was because of Xavier Legette. It wasn't because of anything Spencer Rattler did to me that was amazing. Spencer Rattler threw the ball up. Xavier Legette was there to go get it. And then he got a lot of yards after the catch. And so I was just that was the first time that I had really paid attention to South Carolina's offense in really a few years, because there wasn't a lot to pay attention to when it comes down to South Carolina's offense traditionally over the last 10 years. And Legette just really flashed off the screen. So then that was the person I was paying attention to for them throughout the season. It's wow, this might be the type of guy that the Panthers need, right? The last time we tried to get really big receivers, we're still waiting to see what happens with Jonathan Mingo, but early returns doesn't look good. But Devin Funchess out of the league in a few years. Now he's playing pro basketball. Congratulations to him. Kelvin Benjamin didn't last very long.
Wow.
So really, if you think about it, and I said this to Dennis Cox on our show, who was the last tall burner that we really had at wide receiver? It's really Moose and Muhammad.
Yeah, Moose.
And so, we need that guy. And Xavier Legette is that guy. And so I wouldn't mind if the Panthers, if they feel like, they are cool with what they have and what they like, if they want to, if somebody really wants to move up to 33 and maybe they take something later in the second round to trade down, but they also are getting an extra pick or two or whatever it ends up being to add in some more bodies. I'm cool with that too, just to get some draft capital back. But if not, if Xavier Legette is right there, pick one, day 2, get him. And then if you really like Ladd McConkey, if you really like a Tez Walker, even though I wouldn't put him, get him in the second round. Yeah. If you really like, any other of the wide receivers that are kind of out there at 39, get them. But I think there's other things to be as other things you could use a second round pick on. At 39, you're still basically getting a fringe first round guy.
Right. Yeah.
And so there's other needs to fill. You can get another wide receiver. You got 2 fifths. You can get another wide receiver in the 5th round. Tez Walker's there. Get him.
Yeah, I was gonna say with Tez, I wouldn't mind them taking a crack at Tez, but I think they would be their 3rd, 4th round possibly. Now, what I would like, best case scenario, somebody that Carolina does not want falls in the 1st round, out of the 1st round. So after tonight's over with, Dan Morgan's phone's ringing all night tonight, all morning tomorrow. We get all the way to 8 o'clock or Friday, and the Panthers decide to trade off the 33rd pick. And they pick up the 2nd for whoever is trading with them, plus a 3rd, and maybe something else, depending on how desperate that team is. I could live in this draft with a couple extra 3rd round picks because it does seem to be a lot of depth at offensive lineman and wide receiver and running back. That was a conversation that we were having the other day where I feel like no one's talking about Carolina's need for a running back. I know we've got Chuba Hubbard, and he emerged as the lead back last year. And then you have the case of Miles Sanders, where he's the highest paid running back on the roster by far. But I don't know if we can really grade him based off of what happened last year. The more we find out about the coaching staff and how disjointed they were, I don't know how fair it is to really say that he had a poor season, because it's hard to run the ball when you don't know where the hole's going to be. You know, if one coach is telling you the hole's here and the other one's telling you it's going to be over there, and you need to run a jet sweep this way, then what is he supposed to do? So it's amazing Chuba had success. More success than he should have behind that line. And it might be why Miles had the issues he had. Bryce needs some kind of running back that he can toss it to out the backfield, like a Christian McCaffrey. He needs somebody that's kind of a switchblade, like Jahmyr Gibbs in Detroit. He needs somebody like that that's got speed, got juice, can juke people in space. And I don't know if Miles kind of came in with that pedigree, I guess, but he was also running behind the Eagles' offensive line. So don't know what part of that is, the heavy part of it. What would you do? Would you draft a running back in the 2nd or 3rd round? Because there's a lot of interesting players out there. Trey Benson at Florida State, Blake Corum at Michigan. They're going to be there in the bottom of the 2nd, top of the 3rd.
This is actually something that Dennis and I talked about too. We talked about maybe like the later rounds, maybe one of your 5ths, maybe your 7th, maybe undrafted free agent. Because running back has been, unfortunately, I guess undervalued in the NFL. So you're going to see probably a lot of guys fall, right? One of the reasons we haven't talked about running back for the Carolina Panthers is because overall, we don't really talk about running back. Like how many, besides my man who's in Atlanta right now, we haven't really talked about who came out last year. Mm-hmm. We haven't really talked about any top running backs this year. So you could probably find a really good value for somebody on day 3. And so I don't know if you need to reach on day 2 to get a good running back just because of the way the NFL looks at them. But I'm with you. The Panthers need another running back. And the reason why I say that is because all of the running backs they have between Hubbard, Miles Sanders, and also Blackshear, they all have about the same profile. They're between 5'9" and 6 feet tall, and they're between 205 and 215 pounds. The problem that I always had with when Christian McCaffrey was there is I loved Christian McCaffrey, but Christian McCaffrey is 205 pounds. He's not going to be the guy if you need 1 yard and I need this guy to put his shoulder in the chest of that linebacker and move him a few inches so I can get to the line to gain and get a first down. Christian McCaffrey is just not that guy to do that. They need a bigger body to me, somebody who's more like, I don't know, Deontay Foreman, somebody who's like your co-host, Jonathan Stewart, somebody in the 235, 240 range that has some speed, but also has a lot of power behind them and in their legs to kind of drive piles. Because we also don't have a big quarterback that can execute a sneak, right? So, and I don't want to put Bryce in harm's way. So I think they need a bigger guy. I think they need one of those like big bruiser 240, 250 type of guys.
You want a fullback. Yeah, you want like a
not necessarily a fullback, but like Deontay Foreman and Mike Davis. Those guys, Jonathan Stewart, when he was playing, those guys were between 225 and 240. You know what I'm saying? Like that makes a difference. That makes a difference when you have basically a linebacker back there, Like a lot of times the fullbacks are a little bit bigger, but like you can have those guys who have a little bit more meat behind them, like Derrick Henry. Like Derrick Henry is moving piles. He's probably like 240 right now.
Yeah, that's probably been generous too because he's a big boy.
But that's what I think. That's really what I'm looking for the Panthers. But to talk about Miles Sanders, he could have a better year. Chuba Hubbard could have a better year because that offensive line should be better this year.
Yeah, in theory, yeah, absolutely.
You know, in theory, it really should be better because you got guys who are bigger, stronger, meaner, faster by every stretch of the imagination. And so if everything's better around the line, I love what I heard from Austin Corbett when he spoke to the media the other day about his move to center. He's 100% comfortable with it. Now, I mean, I'm not worried about what Robert Hunt and Damian Lewis are going to do. Now it's all about, hey, Icky, where you at, bro? You going to raise your level of play based on who's next to you? Because if he does, we're talking about a potential top 5 offensive line in the NFL. That should be good for Hubbard and Sanders and Blackstreet.
Yeah. And Bryce and the wide receivers and everything. Everything starts with the offensive line. You know, the wide receivers not getting separation. It might be because the offensive line was a turnstile and Bryce had 2 seconds to throw the football a lot of times last year. Some of that's Bryce footwork. Some of that's the running backs not being able to see the holes. Like it's all joined together. But again, I've kind of come off of at the end of last year. I was catching a lot of strays on Twitter because I was the one that was bringing attention to Bryce Young's footwork, not knowing that the coaching staff was kind of like, we'll deal with it later. Like we'll deal with it in the off season. Like it's not a big deal. Like, and then on the other half, like it's a huge deal. Like this is
there was no off season for the coaching
staff. So I'm just kind of like, all right, let's just call last year a mulligan. Be thankful that Bryce got out of it unscathed, and that we can kind of get a redo. With me, Chris Lee from WRAL, lead sports anchor out in Raleigh, also co-host of the Panthers Playbook with Dennis Cox. You can catch that on the WRAL YouTube channel. As a fellow Panther content creator, you're probably going through the same emotions I am at this point of the year, where it's like, we were here last year. We were so optimistic. We were like up, like the coaching staff had been assembled. We just traded. I think at this point we had just traded up for number 1. So we're like, oh wow, we're really going for it. Panthers don't normally do this. You go after Bryce Young, who's kind of the consensus number 1 at this point last year. And then the rug just got yanked out from underneath us from preseason on. So I think a lot of us are tentative to be excited about what we've seen so far. Where are you? Because I'm kind of like, I said I wasn't going to get hyped for what they're doing.
Yeah.
But I can't help but look at what they're doing and notice a stark difference in team building from last year to this year. There seems to be it seems to be the ship, everyone's on the same ship this year, and it's all pointing the same direction. Where in hindsight last year, it felt like when America would make the dream team after the original one, and you're just plucking names, kind of like what they're doing right now. You're just going to pluck the big NBA names and put them all in one thing and just roll the ball out and just assume it's going to work because of the names or whatever. That's what last year feels like to me now. So my question to you is, how optimistic are you about the Panthers front office and what you've seen going into this draft and beyond?
I'm very optimistic, but I feel like we all went through the same emotions because we were going through the same things for years. Like we hadn't seen the Panthers get to the playoffs since 2017. A lot of Panthers fans loved Ron Rivera. He's out. All of a sudden, Matt Rule comes in, and then a lot of Panthers fans didn't like him from the very beginning. He's out. We thought we had a guy that we liked, right? And Steve Wilkes. They didn't hire him. They go opposite direction. But somebody who had success as a head coach in the NFL, which was opposite from what Matt Rule was. So then when they're telling us we're only really a quarterback away and we have the number, we traded up to get the number 1 pick. So then it's like, well, okay, if they feel this way, if Scott Fitterer, who stood up last year at this time and told us to our faces, right? He said that at every position but 1, we have upgraded from last year on our roster. The 1 was running back. because they obviously traded Christian McCaffrey. And so we were just like, bet we're going to be better. And that's just not what happened for a myriad of reasons. But here's what I've said before on Panthers Playbook. I feel like last year they went into the season saying, you know what? I know this is Bojangles, but we're going to turn this thing into Golden Corral.
Yeah.
We're going to have the chocolate fountain. We're going to have the beef tips. We're going to have the pizza. We're going to have the rolls with the honey butter. We're going to have the fried chicken. We're going to have everything. Everything. And we're going to have it all in here. And this year they just remembered, you know what? We're good at chicken. Let's just do chicken. We're Bojangles. Let's remember we're good at chicken. Let's not do all the craziness. Let's make sure we focus on what we're good at. And a lot of what makes teams good and what it starts with is up front on both sides of the ball. If your offensive line is getting pushed around, if your defensive line is getting pushed around, then the other complementary parts behind them or in front of them or beside them are not going to work well on both sides of the ball, right? So, I think they looked into that. Like they didn't fully replace 1-for-1 Brian Burns, but man, getting Jadeveon Clowney and DJ Wanham and a case Levon Chason who's trying to prove it, who's a former first-round pick, and getting Ashawn Robinson, who's a big boy who's going to help Derek Brown on the other side and make things easier for Shy Tuttle. And LeBron Ray, and then you got on an offensive line guys who can protect and all that. Like, I'm not saying that the Panthers are going to the playoffs, but they might double their win total, which is huge. I mean, that's only 4 wins.
Yeah, that's only 4.
but we're going to say it like that because it's going to sound better. They might be able to double their win total this year, and to me, that is a win.
I could see that. I mean, even with the dysfunction last year, though, I went back and I was starting to think about it. I think there was probably maybe 4 or 5 games where we still could have won the game at the end of it. And it was just incompetence and bad coaching that caused us to lose. And I'm like, okay, the nucleus of some of that is still here. It's almost like Carolina lost games as opposed to teams beat them.
Yes.
Like, I'm still don't know how Houston lost this football game to us earlier in the year.
Every day.
Yeah. It's like, how did they lose? Like, this is the one game where they just stunk it up. But I feel like they drafted people, or not drafted, they brought in people in the offseason that fit the scheme that Xtra wants to run, as opposed to big names or whatever. So it wasn't that big of a deal for him to lose Frankie Louvu or Brian Burns, because they may not necessarily fit his scheme in the first place, which might be why Burns had a down year last year. Louvu was pretty much still 100 tackles, yada, 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 but Josie Jewell feels like a clone of him.
There's reasons for Burns being down.
I know. I didn't want to get in my man's pockets, but but I mean, I don't know. I just feel like going into this draft, I felt way more optimistic than I thought I would in December as we were winding down the season, especially after the last regular season game. I'm just like, I don't even want to do these podcasts right now. Like, I'm just, I'm sick of this. Right. Like, I'm tired of talking about this. But now I'm actually a little rejuvenated and interested to see what happens. So before I get you out of here, bold prediction. What do you think Carolina's going to do with pick 33? Is there a player that you think they zoomed in on? Is it Leggett, or is there somebody else?
Leggett is what I have. But as far as what else I feel like they need to fill out, I think for the undrafted free agent market and towards the end of the draft, maybe you look at running back. But for sure, I think you try to look at a guy. I was hoping that people wouldn't fall in love with Graham Barton from Duke, and that maybe he'd be there at 33 or 39 as their future center. It looks like on a lot of mock drafts, he's moved up to as high as 18 I've seen. So he may be a first rounder, but if Graham Barton falls to that second round, I'd take him over Leggett if he's there at 33. And then maybe see if there's other wide receiver choices you can get, but we need a center, maybe some more offensive line depth. I think we need another linebacker. I don't think that's something that not a lot of people are talking about, because on the defensive side of the ball, a lot of those guys they brought in on shorter contracts, because is Xero ever going to be around for a long time? And he has a very specific scheme, and we gotten guys that will fit within that scheme. So, like, let's not sign all these guys to these long-term deals if this guy's not going to be here. But we know that Shaq Thompson's on the last year of his deal. Josie Jules said, I'm only here because of EJ. You know what I'm saying? We're going to need a linebacker of the future at some point, especially with this team that has a long history of great linebackers, more interior defensive linemen and cornerback. And those are and I would like a tight end. There are areas to work on and to fix, to look at in the draft that they didn't quite get a chance to really fill in during free agency. They may be able to do that for free agency if they're able to get Stephon Gilmore. So that'll help.
He's still out there. Yeah. It seems like that's what he's waiting on. Yeah. So.
But maybe he's waiting on the draft. Maybe they talked already like, hey, we're going to wait till after draft. We'll see how the board falls to us, and then we'll figure out, see how much money we have left. And then we'll come back to you. And if you're cool with it, maybe they've already had that in place, but those are the positions I think they should go after. But I'm expecting Graham Barton to be gone in the first round. So pick one, day 2, Xavier Legette.
Keep an eye out for Zach Frazier, too, the center from West Virginia. Skylar covers West Virginia for Sports Illustrated, and he had him on our radar back in like November. Apparently, this dude broke his leg in a game, was dragging himself up and down the field or something. He's in Dan Morgan's words, a dog. So he might be in play, too, if he's still there at the top of the board at pick 33. Follow Chris on Twitter at ChrisLeeTV. You can follow Panthers Playbook over on the YouTube channel for WRAL. We're in that part of the season where we're all sporadically putting out episodes as the news comes in and out, but I'm sure they'll have some draft coverage as the draft ends, and we'll review the draft and everything else. But you can catch me there.
We're going to go live Saturday night.
Saturday night. Oh, okay. So Saturday night, they're going to be live during the draft. So you can catch them there. And, of course, you can catch them on WRAL TV. Appreciate you coming through, man.
Thanks, man.
So that was the Bleav and Panthers Extra. You can catch that on the Bleav and Panthers podcast, well, the Bleav podcast network, excuse me. You can catch all Bleav and Panthers content there on all major podcast platforms. When we come back, CBS Sports' Ross Tucker will join us. We'll take more of a macro view of the NFL draft here in just a bit. You're listening to Franchise Players.
In professional sports, a franchise player is an athlete who is not simply the best player on their team, but one that the team can build their franchise around for the foreseeable future.
Welcome back to Franchise Players here on Tobacco Road Sports Radio, tobaccoroadsportsradio.com. Again, you can catch us on terrestrial radio across the Triad every Friday. Your home for Triad sports coverage is Tobacco Road Sports Radio, WWBG 1470 AM, 5 o'clock p.m. on Fridays. If you missed it there in Greensboro, you can catch it in Winston-Salem on WTOB 980 AM, 96.7 FM. I'm your host, Desmond Johnson. Shout out to Chris Lee from WRAL, who stopped by a little bit earlier. Talked a little bit about the Carolina Panthers with us, the co-host of the Panther Playbook, and Joe Deleone from the Bleav Podcast Network stopping by to give us some bold predictions for the NFL draft. Coming around third base, it's Ross Tucker. He's a CBS Sports Westwood One personality. Ross, what's going on, man, on a happy draft weekend?
Yeah, I love the draft weekend. Last night was amazing. Good to talk with you, Desmond. Thank you so much for having me on the show.
So I wanted to go more with Chris. We did more micro and went deep into Carolina Panthers stuff. I wanted to go more macro with you and kind of zoom out and look across the NFL here as we begin our draft coverage across this entire weekend. One of the things that popped out to me, I was sitting down eating lunch yesterday in a restaurant, and they had ESPN on, and I saw on the bottom of the ticker, it just broke. The Detroit Lions are out here giving out money to folks. They re-signed offensive tackle Penei Sewell, $112 million extension over the next 4 years. And then right behind that, wide receiver Amon-Ra St. Brown signs a 4-year, $120 million extension, $77 million guaranteed. It's the most for a wide receiver in league history. Both players were first-team All-Pros last year. Are the Lions the team to beat in the NFC North as it stands currently right now in your mind?
Well, no question. Yeah, I don't even think it's debatable based on what they did last year. Now, the Packers have a young team, and they certainly came on towards the end of the year. But the Lions, actually, I guess both the Lions and the Packers were up quite a bit on the Niners, and they weren't able to ultimately seal the deal. San Francisco did such a good job coming back in both those games. But I just think this is very smart by the Lions. You know, this is sort of Philadelphia Eagles-esque, right? You know that you have outstanding players and people that you want to have part of your organization for the next decade, right? Or at least for the next 5, 6, 7 years. Why not sign them now? Why not reward them now and sign them now before the salary cap keeps going up, before other guys at their positions sign and push the ceiling higher? Did the Lions set the market a little bit? Maybe, but that number is only going to go higher now. So they don't have to worry about arguably their two best players being under contract for a long, long time now. They got that done. That's going to be a great feeling for Lions fans. And it's kind of the opposite for some of these other teams. I don't know why the Cowboys are waiting on all these contracts.
Dude.
It's kind of getting the Bengals into hot water now with T. Higgins and Trey Hendrickson. If you have a guy that you want around, it makes a lot of sense to get him signed long-term when you can, because those numbers aren't coming down. They're not going the other way.
Yeah, that's an excellent point. And you make a great point. The case of Dak Prescott, Dallas tried to stall him out for the most part when he was getting his last extension, and he ended up getting injured, waiting for it very much. And in the end, the Cowboys ended up paying more than what they wanted to anyway, because they waited. Like, it's never going to be a situation where if the team waits, they're in a better situation where they can pay less money. Here in Carolina, the Panthers re-upped Derek Brown, defensive tackle, at a $96 million 4-year extension, which puts them around, I think, 4th highest paid DT in the game or whatnot. But you can make an argument Derek Brown might be the best defensive tackle in football right now. He just broke the single season tackle record for a defensive tackle this past season. And I think he's 23, 24. So I agree with you. You got to get him out right now, because if you wait it out, you're going to end up spending way more money than you're supposed to. And Detroit's going to be an issue in the NFC, I believe, going forward. With shout out to head coach Dan Campbell and the patience of the Lions ownership staff to kind of allow them to build this out. Hopefully that'll be happening here in Carolina. Ross Tucker joining us here from CBS Sports. You can follow him on Twitter /X at Ross Tucker NFL. Let me bounce over to the AFC North. The Steelers yesterday, not expecting to pick up 5th-year option on quarterback Justin Fields. Neither Fields or Russell Wilson are under contract next year. Ross, if you had to guess, in 2025, the starting Steeler quarterback will be?
Ooh, that is a good question. Really good question. I guess I'm going to say Russell Wilson. Yeah, I think he's getting the first chance to be the starter. I think he's going to end up playing pretty well. And I think he's going to get a contract extension there. Maybe not something huge, but I think he'll be the starter. And then maybe the Steelers will start to think about who's gonna be the heir apparent to Russell Wilson there in Pittsburgh. But I think that Mike Tomlin really likes him. I think they like his professionalism, still has the mobility. And I thought he actually played pretty well for the Broncos last year. I don't know why the Broncos were in such a hurry to get rid of him. I don't think they handled that situation very well. And I think I'm going to go with Russell Wilson, but really it's a toss-up. I will say it's why, and I talked about this on the Ross Tucker Football Podcast and my betting podcast, which I know is big there now in North Carolina, the Even Money Betting Podcast. The season win total for the Steelers was 8.5. Mike Tomlin's never had a losing season. And you have 2 bites at the apple, 2 options at the quarterback position with both Wilson and Fields, who I think both of them are better than Kenny Pickett or Mason Rudolph. So that's my favorite bet so far this offseason, is the Pittsburgh Steelers over 8.5 season win total.
Yeah, it's a pretty safe bet. A Mike Tomlin team is going to get you 9 wins plus or whatnot. And they had no business winning 10 games last year, in my opinion, in terms of the quarterback room they had and everything else. For Tomlin to still get that team to 10 wins is amazing to me. And now I think they had the best offseason move out of all the teams, because they basically flipped their quarterback room out for like $1 million and like a 6th-round pick or whatever. They switched it to Russell Wilson and Justin Fields. So it's like, okay, I don't know what's going to happen with Justin Fields. But I agree. I think Russell's still got a couple years left in the tank. And if he has a defense, it's proven, Russell can get you wins. So what better place than Pittsburgh to try to rejuvenate that career? So we'll see what's going to happen there. Let's go ahead and move into the NFL draft real quick. Let's stay at the top of the draft with Chicago. This of course will air on Thursday before the draft begins, but on Friday it'll be on the radio. How do you feel about Chicago and Caleb Williams, this number 1 pick? Because it feels like it's pretty self-determined that Caleb Williams is going first overall. Actually, here's a better question. Do you feel like there's a can't-miss prospect in this year's draft? Because I do feel like this year is a little different than previous drafts where there seemed to be a guy at the top everybody was looking at. I don't really catch that vibe this year, even though Caleb's been kind of slotted in that position. Do you feel like there's a can't-miss prospect in this draft?
No, what I think is most interesting is on my show, the Raw Soccer Football Podcast. I've had so many experts come on, Desmond, guys that really put in the work, right? Dan Orlovsky, Louis Riddick, Greg Cosell, Phil Simms, Chase Daniel. And it's kind of a consensus, really, that they all raved about Jaden Daniels. They all love Jaden Daniels and watching his tape. We know about the running, but they're talking about him as a passer, from the pocket, progression reading. And they all had a lot of questions about Carolina's own Drake May. Somebody said disappointing. I think Phil Simms said his tape was disappointing.
Oh, wow.
Somebody said the throw-to-throw accuracy isn't there. There were concerns about, missing some layups, his footwork. Somebody said he's raw. Just a lot of negativity around Drake May. So it's just interesting to me that, Jaden Daniels was unanimous positive, and then the consensus for Drake May was not real good, I don't pretend to be a quarterback expert. I'm not going to go on shows about, his footwork's terrible. Like, I bring on the guys that watch multiple games and get their opinion. And it was almost unanimous for both those guys.
Wow. That's pretty wild. Now Daniels, the reigning Heisman Trophy winner, and Drake May, who threw for 4,000 yards his freshman year at Carolina, kind of cooled down last year. Carolina kind of had an up and down year, but those two names being bounced around, we'll see how their careers go going forward. Top of the second round, Carolina Panthers kind of control the board from that point on Friday night, holding the top pick, number 33, plus pick 39 that they received from the Giants with the trade for Brian Burns. If you're the Panthers, is there a name, and I'll get you out of here on this one, is there a name that maybe is a fringe first rounder or a first rounder that may drop that you would run to the podium for at pick 33? Or if you were the GM, if you were Dan Morgan, Ross, would you look at pick 33 and be like, I'm trading this pick. I'm trading down. I'm getting extra picks. We got too many holes. Like, would you rather get a player, or would you rather get picks out of pick 33?
Well, I would strongly consider trading down, especially if you don't have to trade down that much and still be able to get one of these receivers, right? There still is a bunch of really good receivers, starting caliber guys that are available. I think Carolina needs one desperately. I just don't think Adam Thielen has that much left. We'll see what Deontay Johnson brings to the table, but I still think receiver is a major need. I'd love to see them trade down and still take one of these high-end receivers.
Yeah, Xavier Legette seems to be from South Carolina, seems to be the one that everyone's kind of pointing at, might be there for Carolina at pick 33. And this tier 2 of wide receivers, they're all, we talked about on Bleav in Panthers earlier this week. It feels like there's not a multi-tool guy except for maybe like Malik Neighbors and Marvin Harrison Jr., but they're going to be up in the top 10 or 15 or whatever they get when they get picked. The second group of wide receivers, Legette, Franklin, some of these others, it feels like they're almost interchangeable. None of them can do everything, but all of them have like one thing they do really, really well. One's really fast, or one has really good hands, or whatever it might be. So there might still be wide receivers. Well, there will be wide receivers at pick 39 as well. So we'll find out Friday evening what Carolina does, as they will basically control the board as we open up the second round. We'll see if Dan Morgan still holds that second round pick when we start off on Friday evening. Before we get you out of here, though, Ross, I wanted to let you have an opportunity to talk about myfrontpagestory.com with his former NFL offensive lineman, Ross Tucker, 7-year NFL veteran, played for the Washington Redskins, the Cowboys, the Bills, and the Patriots. Tell us a little bit about myfrontpagestory.com.
Yeah, I mean, Desmond, it's by far the best Mother's Day gift ever. For people that are watching on video, I'm showing an example of it. I mean, my sister and I got one from my mom a couple years ago, and it was so easy. I mean, you talk to a writer for 10 minutes, and they write this unbelievable story. You just tell them how great your mom is. They write this amazing story, and then there's pictures. It looks like it's on the cover of the newspaper, framed, beautiful. When my mom read the quote from my sister saying, "I just wouldn't be the woman I am today if it weren't for my mom," my mom just started bawling. I mean, absolutely bawling. She loved it. I highly, highly recommend it. She has it hanging up right by the front door in her house, which is a little bit weird, but it's also awesome because she loves it that much. myfrontpagestory.com. Best Mother's Day gift I've ever seen. myfrontpagestory.com.
So definitely go check that out. MyFrontPageStory.com with Mother's Day coming up here. Right around the corner. I just looked at the date. The draft coverage just kind of sucked us all in, but it'll all be over here in a couple of days. So we'll all be able to breathe. I think Ross, myself, pretty much all the folks that have been dealing with the draft stuff the past couple of weeks are going to sleep on Monday and just kind of sleep it out and get ready for mini camps and rookie camps and things of that sort. Follow Ross on Twitter at Ross Tucker NFL. CBS Sports and Westwood One's Ross Tucker. Appreciate you coming through.
My pleasure, Desmond. Thanks so much for having me.
And that's it for franchise players for the week ending April 25th, 2024. We'll be back next week with a brand new episode. We'll talk to you then. Peace.